about the destabilizing effect of idle hands and idle minds, and the appeal of radical Islamist critics who promise everything if only God's law will be respected, without ever having to prove that that might be the case. So they're in a great position to criticize. And then take the opposite extreme of countries with unbelievable hydrocarbon resources that are only answerable to a few 100,000 citizens. I mean, we think about Qatar. Who wouldn't want to be in Qatar's position? Imagine having all of the wealth coming in from their gas and oil resources and only having 250,000 nationals to be responsible for. At that rate, you could basically, as a matter of government policy, give everybody an outstanding working wage, a Mercedes to drive, and a fine home to live in, and carry on ruling as you see fit. Against that background, there is a clear sense of the need to get beyond the problems that had bedeviled the region. And I think that we see in the Abdullah Plan and the willingness of the Arab League to say, in return for a withdrawal from all occupied territories, we're very happy to normalize relations with Israel. We see that one of the important changes that's happened is that there's no longer that ideological impediment of Arab nationalism to trying to address the region's problems. I think you can say that across the board. There really is a recognition that so long as justice is done, no one has a problem with the Jewish state anymore. It's been there 60 years, and it's a de facto recognized reality. It's really not what Israel is, it's what Israel does that's the problem. And I think that's one important change that's going on. Maybe positive, maybe negative, but I think that the whole specter of Arabism is falling off the region. I think that what held the behavior of Arab states together out of common Arab action and common Arab purpose is getting weaker and weaker. And it's a trivial example, but I think the result of the Cairo-Algeria playoff for the World Cup was devastating. The fact that by losing a football game, two countries that had, through their revolutions and subsequent history, stood shoulder to shoulder against such important, shared adversaries and conflicts, should now be invoking the war against the French or the defeat of 1967 to capture their sense of humiliation, suggests that in the very heart of Arabism, the candle's gone out. So these are the kinds of bigger trends that I see at work. But again, it's very hard to generalize on such a diverse region beyond those sorts of broad parameters.
Hi, my name is Ann Rutherford, and I was wondering, regarding to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that there are a lot of people who think that they're very close. They're going to declare themselves a state. There's a lot of cooperation going on. Is there any effort and coordination with all these think tanks in Washington, D.C. and across the country, and I know there are a lot of them, any coordination or effort to engage the American public in support of that effort?
That's a really interesting question. I think that for many of the think tanks, serious work on the Arab-Israeli conflict is very complicated by the heavy politics that comes with the issue. I think the most influential new voice to emerge on the scene is that group of American Jews who are both pro-Israel and pro-peace, and they call themselves J Street. And I think that J Street is in many ways provoking controversy, but is also bringing the mainstream view of Americans and of American Jews to counterbalance the influence that AIPAC has had, which is to say Israel right or wrong regardless of what it does. And in that sense, I think J Street's work is cut out for it. I think it's a small organization. It's not a particularly strong organization yet. But if it succeeds in its mission of engaging the American public to take a pro-peace position further, then we might see the best example of what it is you're asking for.
Wendy Chamberlain, the Middle East Institute, if I could just address that question a bit, the answer is yes, that there are like-minded NGOs within Washington who do meet, who do talk with a common purpose of educating the American public to the region and to the importance of a two-state solution in the Arab-Israeli conflict, and this institute is one of them.
Okay.
Mohammed El-Minshaw from Arab Insight. You mentioned Arab world are very diverse, and that's completely true. Yet most Arab countries, all of them, fall short on democratic progress. Does history provide answer for shortage of democracy in most Arab countries, whatever democratic, whatever republic or royals, or they were under British occupation or Italian or French?
The democracy question is a big one, and it's one that crops up time and again. In the writing of my history, I was quite intrigued to see the way that democratic institutions were first introduced to the region. It's worth remembering that already in the 19th century you had elected representation in Egypt, and that in the period between the First and Second World Wars, you had diverse multi-party politics in countries like Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt. So there is actually an extensive history of democracy that has in many ways been a tragic history, where I think what is the good idea of democratic institutions is compromised by those who have introduced it or how it's been manipulated. And I fear that that might be another thing that we could repeat a mistake on by democracy promotion policies that the United States might wish to encourage, to try and push countries in the region that do not currently have working democratic institutions to adopt them. I think that it is an area in which the United States probably does not have a constructive contribution to make. I know that many democracy activists in the region would disagree with me. I know they're very disappointed with President Obama letting drop, let's say, support for democracy activists in Egypt. But let's be honest, even under President Bush, who provided a great deal of financial support, there was such inconsistency in the promotion of democracy in Egypt, of trying to support opposition movements like Ghad and Kifaya, but all the while supporting and backing up the Mubarak government as an essential ally in the war on terror and whatnot, meant that America wasn't really seen as being totally serious in trying to force Mubarak to empower people to overturn him by the vote, without which it's meaningless. I think America, in trying to promote democracy in the Middle East, clearly let itself down by not accepting what the result of the Palestinian elections had turned out with the Hamas victory. And I think when they turned their backs on the democratically elected government in Lebanon to allow Israel to prosecute a very violent war because of actions taken by Hezbollah, was again a time where people said, America doesn't mean bringing us, beneficial institutions through democracy. Democracy is obviously some strategy to dominate us. I'm on the wrong question.
Just this ignore the United States now. What went wrong with Arab? Why were we lack short of democracy from historical point of view?
Okay, a very quick answer. I think the military and politics. I think the military and politics has pretty well killed democracy in the Arab world. And I think that democracy will reemerge in the Arab world only as the role of the military is distanced. And I'm less concerned to see the practice of the vote at this point than to see the space opened for the free expression of political ideas. So show me a widening of press freedoms, show me free association, show me the right for people to create such political parties or NGOs as match their political aspirations, and show me free access to expression on the internet and related media, which, as we have seen in the case of Iran, have proven very influential in empowering Iranian political activists. And then I think from that will come the later parts of democratization, which is to say people running for office and using the vote to change government by peaceful means. But in historical perspective, I think it's the military and politics I would put.
David Newton, I'm an adjunct scholar here and also a retired Foreign Service officer.
Pleasure to meet
I
you.
read your book about 3 months ago. It really is superb, and it told me that I really wasn't too old to learn.
Me neither.
And I do hope you send a courtesy copy of the book to Bernard Lewis.
I haven't yet, but I will.